Andrea Keller, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you very much, Greg.
I'm just wondering, who were the artists that made the biggest impact on you early in your career?
Well, when I started listening to jazz, I was listening to people like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk. So I definitely started with that African American jazz sort of tradition. And then I started getting more into, I suppose, the ECM and the European, perhaps. I mean, still in the American tradition, definitely, but started to listen to people like John Taylor and Keith Jarrett and, lots of people that recorded a lot on ECM and started discovering this other sort of way of making jazz, I suppose. So that was a big influence in the early days as well.
Yeah. What about mentors, people that helped you out along the way?
Yeah, well, I've been really lucky with people who have been generous enough to show me the way with things and who have been really supportive. So probably my biggest mentor, I'd say, would have been Alan Brown, the great Australian drummer. And I was really fortunate to play in his band for about 15 years, or play in bands with him, different trios. And he really had an enormous impact on my life in general, but especially the way that I was making music, or the way I perceived myself as a musician. And he really just helped to strengthen me, I think, in the most sort of generous and supportive way. So I'm really grateful to him for that.
You work with a lot of different people. What do you look for in the artists that you choose to work with?
I think I'm generally drawn towards musicians who have a sense of individuality about them. Because I like to make music that is, I think, a very personal expression and a very sort of appropriate to my life and who I am and my background and all of that. So I really enjoy that in other musicians, when I feel like they've got a very strong personal voice. And I'm drawn to musicians who love to experiment and explore different things, different ways of making music, different ways of making sound, different ways of interacting. So generally I'm drawn to those musicians with a real spark of individuality and originality about them. But also I've found that with a lot of those musicians, they're incredibly generous in what they give to the music. So that's what I really value, in other musicians. It's musicians who would like to come together and collaborate and have a dialogue.
As I said, you play with a lot of different musicians and many different musical projects. Apart from the excitement that presents, do you find that you get bored easily if you're not doing anything or doing the same thing for a while?
It depends. I mean, doing the same thing for a while I don't mind so much, because it means you can go quite deep into the possibilities within something, even if you're repeating the same repertoire and playing with the same people. There's a familiarity that grows from that you don't get when you're just brushing through different situations and experiences. So I actually really enjoy that. The projects I've had that have had a longer term of life, sometimes they have a higher turnover of repertoire than others. Other times the projects will have the same repertoire for a really long time. But I've always found in those situations, I've never found it boring, because there's always something, there's always something that I haven't discovered, or something new, or, like I said, that familiarity that happens only when you spend long enough with something. That actually breeds this whole other series of opportunities that I don't find those if I'm just skimming. So I wouldn't say I get bored easily, but I do, I think, get a little bit overexcited easily. When I'm, the projects that I start and the groups that I initiate, they're always based on the people, that I've heard and met people that I would really like to play with. So I create opportunities and projects around people, and then I compose music a lot of the time for those people. And what happens is that I just get really excited and think, oh yes, that would be a great idea, I'm going to do that. And then I'm the sort of person that once I've decided that that would be a really good idea, I sort of can't not do it. I have to make it happen. So maybe that's why it looks like I'm always sort of, you know, creating new groups, but it's not because I'm bored, it's actually just because I'm overly excited about all the possibilities that I see. And I'm also very fortunate that I've been given opportunities to present things, so I actually do have the means to create new projects.
How do you document your musical ideas?
Do you mean when I'm composing? Or yeah. So I have different processes when I'm writing. Sometimes I sit at the piano and I just have this impulse that I want to create something. So I play a little bit and try and stick to pretty much the first idea that comes out, and then work with that idea. And along the way I'm jotting down on manuscript with a grey lead and an eraser. I'm jotting down the ideas. And then eventually when that becomes more solidified, I'll put it onto Sibelius notation software or you know, computer software. But I also do things where I record improvisations, and I'll record improvisations every day for a really long period and then pick out ideas that I like from those and then create compositions out of those. But generally that's the same process after I've got the ideas, where I'll be sitting at the piano and writing down things by hand. Before I ever go to a computer, because I don't find the computer to be the creative space for me. I know it is for some people, and probably a lot more for younger generation musicians who have grown up in a very heavily technological sort of society, but you know, I'm still back from the time where, you know, we didn't have answering machines, and I remember very vividly not having email or not having to check my emails every day. So I still love that, you know, buying really nice manuscript paper and pencil. But yeah, I have different processes, but I suppose in the end it's always that writing down, then creating some kind of formal score of it. And then of course there's the recording aspect, like the actual realisation of it with real musicians and documenting it that way.
Yeah. Musical improvisation is adventurous, can be quite daring. What have been some of your more exciting improvisational performances, and have there been times where it didn't work?
Well, of course there's been times where it didn't work. That's the nature of improvisation. That's the nature of creating music spontaneously, is that you could seemingly have all the right ingredients for it to work fantastically. You could have fantastic instruments and sound and, you know, a great room and great collaborators, but still for some reason it may not work. Or you could be in a really sort of, you know, unoptimal, is that the right word, situation, you know, in terms of instruments and availability, but still something really special can happen with the music. So it can be a little bit unpredictable like that, but I think that that's what we all love about it, is that, you know, you put yourself out there and you're always kind of trying your best, or you've always got best intentions, and then slowly learning how to try and create those situations where it is at the optimum. And you know, most of the time, as a lot of improvisers have spoken about, it's about those mindsets, those playful mindsets that you can get into where you're not caring so much, and it's really just play and taking risks and being in the moment. And you can, when you get that with other musicians, it's really wonderful. And for me, the best experiences of that, I mean, they're not necessarily in great venues or anything. They're just, it's been the right mix of people with the right mix of people in the audience, and that give and take generosity that happens, that loop that happens, you know, between musicians and listeners when they're creating music. For some reason that's just all in sync and all, you know, all working beautifully, and the improvisation works. So it's definitely about a state of mind more than anything else, and it can happen in a dingy room, or, you know, or in a really beautiful venue on the other side of the world. It could be anything.
Yeah. Tell me about the tools of your trade. keyboards you have and pianos you have at home that you work with?
Well, I have a very small sort of space at home and very small home with a lot of people living in it. So I just have an upright piano, but I have a really wonderful Yamaha silent piano, which actually changed my life quite significantly because I'm an early riser, because I'm a mother of 3, and so for many years actually the early hours of the morning have been my working time. And for many years I worked on a Nord electro keyboard, which I still have and I still use, but I used to practice on that in the mornings with the headphones so that I wouldn't wake the family. But when I got this Yamaha silent piano, I've since been able to practice on that. So I'm actually practicing on a real piano with the action and everything, and the range. And the other beautiful thing about that piano is that I can record directly onto USB with it, which was also when I spoke earlier about the daily improvisation activity that I do. I record it directly from the silent piano at 4 a.m. I can do it, directly onto the USB and build my sort of data collection of improvisations like that. So, between the Nord and the Yamaha silent piano, I'm pretty set up at home. I'm pretty happy with that.
You've released a lot of piano recordings. What have you learned about getting a good recorded piano sound in the studio?
That I leave to the experts. I try and make sure, just from purely a piano point of view, that the piano that's in the studio is the best one I can find for that situation, because I actually really I love to just play with the acoustic piano sound. So if it's possible, I choose not to wear headphones in the studio. Of course, that's sometimes not possible if you've got a bigger band with drums and amplified bass or guitar and people are in different booths and rooms, then obviously everyone needs to wear cans. But if it's a trio and we can set up close and acoustically, because we record very live, we don't record in a way that we're going to do a large amount of editing. We actually don't do that. It's very live. What you hear is what we played. So if I can, I prefer to play without cans. So then it's really important that the piano just makes the most beautiful sound it can possibly make. And if I do have to wear cans, that is something that I struggle with, because I'm so used to the way the piano sounds when it hits me in the head like this. Direct from the soundboard. So when I've got the cans and it's been somehow mixed and, the EQ I find all of that really difficult. But, basically, I think if I've got a good instrument and I'm able to find my sound on it, and then I've got good sound engineers who have all the best mics and do all of that, the result is pretty good.
Yeah. We're at the JazzLab and you're sitting at a beautiful Yamaha grand at the moment. How can one grand piano differ from another?
Mm-hmm. Well, they differ quite significantly. They obviously differ based on the size of them, because that affects the resonance. The range will be the same on a standard 88 key piano, but the sort of resonance and the volume that you can get out of it will differ depending on the size of it. So that's one thing that really affects things. Of course, the action of the piano, like of the keys, what it feels like, that's going to vary from piano to piano. Yamaha actions will have a sort of more similar thing generally. I mean, even within one family of instruments, there'll be variation. But for example, I've played some Australian-made Stewart and Sons pianos, which are bigger than 88 keys. They're like 102 to 108 keys, and they've got 4 foot pedals, and they're made from Australian timber, and they're acoustically treated quite differently. So, the sound on one of those is vastly different to a Yamaha, and different again to a Steinway, and so. And then, of course, there's the tuning and all of that, the sort of upkeep of the piano. So, yeah, it's really a very, very much a mixed bag. I love coming here because, I know the Yamaha piano well, and I'm here every week. And this piano was even from the old Bennett's Lane, which I played for many years there. So I feel like this piano's home. But, yeah, then sometimes you're with pianos, you end up with a piano, and it can be a bit of a fight all night, yeah.
As we said, we're here at the JazzLab. You curate Monday nights here. How did that begin, and what was the goal with these nights?
Well, I was really lucky because Michael Tortoni, who owns the club, when he was opening this new JazzLab in June of 2017, he approached me to ask if I would like to have the Monday night residency. And I said, absolutely. And so basically I started it then. I think I might have started in July. I think the club opened in June with the Melbourne Jazz Festival, International Jazz Festival. And then the Mondays began in July. And my idea with it was, because I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity, was to try and share it around as much as possible. So to do that, I've set up a number of different projects and bands. Some of them are bands that I clearly run, but others of them are more series. So for example, we have the Piano Club, which happens about once every 2 months or sometimes once a month. And that's where I invite other piano players to come, and we play solo piano sets and then have a Q&A afterwards. Or I've got a series called Celebrating Voice, where I ask 2 singers to come and we have a sort of a set band, and then we perform with the singers and also have a Q&A. And so they're just really nice ways of building community. I used to also have a Masters and Apprentices series, which was about putting together emerging artists with established artists and creating bands to kind of facilitate some of that mentoring that's so important in music. So all of those projects are really about creating community and sharing the opportunities. And I don't always play. I play a lot of the Mondays, but sometimes I just come and actually sort of introduce and then do host the Q&A or things like that. So it's been really wonderful, and it's also given me the opportunity to start a lot of new bands, which has been great. So the last few years, all of the bands that I've started have been born here at the JazzLab. So.
As you said, you've been on the other side of the microphone with the Q&As. Mm-hmm. You also had a series, Stories and Songs, on Gender Defying Jazz YouTube channel. What do you get out of doing that?
Well, it's really wonderful to talk to other musicians. Like, I love asking other musicians about their process and their approach and what their experiences have been. So the Gender Defying Jazz began as Girls Do Jazz, and we've updated it to Gender Defying Jazz to be more inclusive of all people that identify as female or non-binary or trans. And so really I started it as a way of, in lockdown, of sharing with our GDJ community some musicians who identify as female from the international scene, and I asked them all the same 3 questions, and then asked them to share some music with us that was meaningful for them, that they'd created. So it was actually from it started from an education standpoint, but it really for me personally, it was wonderful because I not only got to meet and become familiar with some musicians that I only really knew by name and from some recordings but didn't know so well, and also it allowed me to go deeper into understanding some of the local musicians that I have known for a really long time, but asking them certain questions meant that I was given information that I actually didn't know about them and the way they perceived themselves musically and what their history had been. So that was really, really fantastic to gain that insight.
You've won many awards, ARIAs, Awards, Jazz Bell Awards. More recently in 2019, you won one of the awards in the Melbourne Prize for Music, which is run so well by Simon Warrender. How were you able to use that cash prize to assist you with your music?
Well, that was a wonderful award to win and a really great honour. And I won that just at the end of 2019, and I had plans to go overseas and to record an album overseas and do a little tour as part of that. And of course, COVID made all of that impossible. But what I ended up doing was recording and releasing in 2020, 2021, I released 6 albums. So basically, and that was really important for me as a way of trying to stay connected to the broader music community, especially in those long periods where we weren't able to perform and certainly weren't able to travel. I mean, the travel has only really started up for me nationally in this year, I suppose, and internationally I'm yet to go abroad, since the pandemic. So that was really wonderful, and it also created this relationship with Beleura House in Mornington, and they actually housed two of those fantastic Stewart and Sons pianos, and I recorded there, and so it actually was a really, really wonderful award to win, and has given me so much, even though it didn't actually deliver what I'd hoped it would deliver. I think I've made really good use of it by creating all of this new music and sharing it with everyone.
When you look back at your music career, what are your strongest memories?
My strongest memories, I struggle with questions like this because I feel so fortunate and so many great things have happened. I love travelling to play music, and I love meeting new musicians and playing with different musicians. I love that about jazz and improvised music, is that it is so collaborative, and it is a language that you can very easily step into, pretty much any musical situation and be able to create music with other like-minded people. So my strongest memories would definitely be from travelling and from collaborations and interactions with other musicians.
What about bucket list projects? Things in the back of your mind that you want to get to one day?
Well, I still want to go overseas and make more music overseas and collaborate and travel and tour. That's definitely a big plan, and there's a few specific people that I would like to do that with. What else? I don't know, I just want to keep on keeping on. I just want to keep making music. I'm not really a bucket list. I suppose, look, I'm a huge fan of Arvo Pärt. He's a contemporary Estonian composer, and I did my PhD on him. And I did have the opportunity to go to Estonia a couple of times, and I met him at the Arvo Pärt Centre, as I was doing my research. And I suppose if I was to dream completely big, and I don't even know what it would look like, but it would be to somehow interact with Arvo Pärt in a musical sense. But that's just like a dream.
And what else is coming up for the rest of 2022?
More gigs. Now that we're really, back to performing, all the festivals are coming back, which is fantastic. Melbourne International Jazz Festival and Wangaratta Jazz Festival and Melbourne Women's International Jazz Festival and the Sydney International Women's Jazz Festival. So there's performances, coming up at all of those festivals. I'm also the H.C. Coombs Fellow at ANU in Canberra this year. So I've been travelling there quite a bit to do various research activities and creating new music and concerts and recordings and things. So I'll continue to do that this year.
The future of jazz, are you hopeful or fearful?
I'm definitely hopeful. I'm definitely hopeful. I'm fortunate I teach at a university, and there are some amazing young musicians there, not only at our university, Australia-wide. Often in my travels when I get to interact with the younger generations of musicians, I'm completely blown away. So definitely hopeful.
And finally, what are you most proud of in your music career?
What am I most proud of? Well, I don't know if it's pride necessarily, but I'm most grateful for all the relationships that I've created, the musical relationships that I've been able to be a part of, to foster, to nurture, because those have been the most meaningful things. And those are the things that have already lasted for a very long time, and I imagine they will, or I hope that they will continue to last for a really long time. So I'm most proud of the musical relationships and those collaborations that have been born, and really deep friendships. That's really rewarding.
Andrea Keller, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Greg.